Once, in a small town nestled deep within the mountains, there lived a young woman named Clara. She was known for her beauty, grace, and a kindness that seemed boundless. She worked at the local library, where she spent her days surrounded by the musty smell of old books and the warm glow of afternoon sunlight filtering through the tall windows. One evening, as she was closing up, Clara noticed a book she had never seen before lying on one of the tables. It was a small, leather-bound volume, its cover worn and unmarked by any title or author's name. Curious, she picked it up and began to flip through its pages. To her surprise, the book was filled with detailed drawings, sketches of people and places that seemed oddly familiar. As she continued to look through it, she realized that these weren't just random sketches. They were scenes from her own life. There was a drawing of the library with her standing by the counter. Another showed her at her favorite cafe, sipping tea by the window. As she turned the pages faster, she began to see images of her apartment, her childhood home, and the park where she often took walks. Every page was a snapshot of a moment she had lived. Her heart began to race as she reached the last few pages. The drawings there were different. They depicted events that hadn't happened yet. One showed her walking through the park at night, her face marked with fear. Another captured her standing in front of a door, her hand outstretched as if about to knock, her expression tense. The final page was blank, except for a single chilling sentence written in neat cursive handwriting. "This is the end." She told herself it was just a strange coincidence, perhaps a prank by one of the town's more eccentric residents. Yet, she couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest. She hurried home, locking the door behind her and drawing all the curtains. That night she had trouble sleeping. Her dreams were filled with images from the book, particularly the last few pages. She awoke in a cold sweat, the words, "This is the end," echoing in her mind. The next day she went about her routine as usual, trying to forget about the book. But as evening approached, a feeling of dread crept over her. She found herself avoiding the park, the place where one of the final drawings had shown her. Instead, she took a different route home. Yet the sense of foreboding only grew stronger. When she reached her apartment, she saw a note taped to her door. The handwriting was identical to that in the book. "It's time." Her hands trembling, Clara unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, except for a faint light coming from the living room. As she walked towards it, she saw something that made her heart nearly stop. A book, identical to the one she had found in the library, lying open on her coffee table. Slowly she approached it, her breath catching in her throat. The book was open to the last page, but now it wasn't blank. Instead, there was a new drawing, still wet as if freshly inked. It was a sketch of Clara herself, lying on the floor, her eyes wide open and lifeless. The room around her was her living room, drawn in perfect, eerie detail. Panicked, she backed away, only to feel a presence behind her. She turned around quickly, but there was nothing there, only the shadows dancing on the walls. Desperate, she ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The windows were locked tight. She was trapped. As she turned back toward the living room, she saw that the book had somehow moved. It was now on the floor, right where the drawing had shown her lying. Clara screamed, but there was no one to hear. The light in the room flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. The last thing she saw was the page of the book, glowing faintly, the drawing of her body slowly taking on more and more detail. Then, everything went silent. The next day, the townsfolk found Clara's apartment empty. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of where she might have gone. Only a single book was left on the coffee table, its pages empty, as if it had never been drawn in at all. But the last page still held those chilling words, "This is the end."